Hello, everyone. You're checking. Don't pretend you're not. You're checking phone more than you want to admit, more than feels dignified, more than you'd confess to friends who tell you to just move on, like moving on from someone you actually care about, is simple decision you make once and execute cleanly. Every notification, every BUZ, every time screen lights up, that half second of hope before you check and it's not them, just work email, just spam, just literally anyone else. And each time it's not them, you tell yourself you're being ridiculous, that you need to stop, that this level of checking is pathetic, that you're better than this. But then 10 minutes later, you're checking again because maybe this time, maybe they texted while you were distracted. Maybe you missed notifications somehow, even though phone is literally in your hand. And the silence, their continued silence, is creating stories in your head, elaborate stories, each one worse than the last. They don't care. They've moved on. They're with someone else. I'm forgettable. I was just casual to them when they were significant to me. Every story confirms your worst fears, and worst fears are loud, are convincing, are creating evidence from absence, building entire narrative from nothing. But here's what's actually happening. Here's why they haven't called or texted yet. They're terrified, not indifferent, not forgetting you, not moved on, terrified. Terrified of rejection, terrified of making wrong move, terrified of saying wrong thing, terrified of wanting you this much, terrified of being vulnerable, terrified of disrupting whatever equilibrium they've built that doesn't include you, even though it's hollow equilibrium. And terror creates paralysis, creates staring at your name in phone without pressing call, creates typing message 17 times and deleting 16 of them, creates planning what they'll say and then never saying it because plan feels inadequate. You think silence means they're not thinking about you, but they're thinking about you constantly, obsessively, maybe, thinking so much it's interfering with work, with sleep, with every other aspect of life that's supposed to be separate from you. But thinking doesn't translate to contact when fear is stronger than courage, when imagining your response creates more anxiety than continuing to wait. They're overthinking every possible approach. Should I text casual? Should I be honest? Should I apologize first? Should I pretend nothing happened? Should I acknowledge the distance? Each option feels wrong. Each approach has risks. Each scenario they imagine ends with you rejecting them or being cold or having moved on. So they choose known, choose continued silence as safest option, even though silence is slowly killing them, even though silence is creating the very distance they're afraid of. That overthinking is loop. That's why silence continues, not because they're reaching conclusion, because they can't stop analyzing long enough to just fucking reach out. They're waiting for perfect moment, perfect timing, perfect words, perfect emotional state, perfect alignment of circumstances that will make reaching out feel safe. But perfect never comes. Perfect is myth. Perfect is excuse fear uses to prevent action. So they wait for perfect, and days become weeks, and weeks become months. And the longer they wait, the harder reaching out becomes because now they have to explain the wait itself. Why didn't I text sooner? How do I explain silence? What if they're angry about how long I waited? Additional layer of complexity. additional barrier to contact, all self-created, but feeling real nonetheless. They're dealing with something they haven't told you about, something real, something consuming, something that's making everything, including reaching out to you, feel impossible. Could be work crisis, family emergency, health issue, mental health spiral, financial disaster, loss, addiction struggle, legal problem, something significant enough that it's absorbing all bandwidth. And in middle of that crisis, reaching out to you feels like I can't give them what they deserve right now. I can't show up properly. Better to wait until I'm functional again. Noble, maybe, considerate, possibly, but also assuming you don't want to be there during hard instead of just during easy, assuming you need them perfect instead of just honest. That assumption that you need them fixed before they contact you creates distance, creates silence while they're trying to get to place where they feel worthy of your attention. But worthy is moving target, gets pushed further every time they think they're getting close. Just need to handle this thing first, then I'll reach out. And this thing becomes, next thing becomes thing after that. And reaching out never happens because worthiness never feels achieved. They're respecting what they think is your boundary. You said you needed space, or you seemed distant, or you didn't respond enthusiastically last time they reached out. And they interpreted that maybe correctly, maybe incorrectly, as don't contact me, as I need you to back off, as I'm not interested. So they're backing off, giving you space they think you wanted, respecting boundary they think you set, even though what you actually wanted, what you actually want, might be completely different, might be them showing up, them fighting for connection, them being persistent, not in creepy way, but in I care enough to not just disappear way. But they can't read minds, can't know what you want when signals feel mixed, can't distinguish between I need space temporarily and I'm done permanently. So they choose what feels safest: silence, respect, distance. Even though silence is opposite of what connection requires. They're convinced you've moved on, have created entire story where you're happy without them, dating someone else, not thinking about them at all. And that story, that belief you've moved on, makes reaching out feel pointless. Why would I text them when they're clearly fine? Why would I disrupt their new happiness? Why would I make myself vulnerable when outcome is already decided? So they stay silent, not because they don't want to reach out, because they've convinced themselves reaching out would be selfish, would be bothering you, would be pathetic attempt to reclaim something you've already released. But that story, probably wrong. You haven't moved on, you're checking phone, you're reading this, you're clearly not fine with the silence. But they don't know that. Can't see you checking, can't hear you wondering, can't access the reality that contradicts their assumption. So assumption becomes truth in their mind. And truth based on assumption creates continued silence. They're punishing themselves, decided they don't deserve you, that they fucked up too badly, that silence is what they deserve for whatever they did or didn't do. And that self-punishment creates barrier. I shouldn't reach out. I don't deserve response. I should just accept that I lost this and suffer the consequences. That suffering feels righteous, feels like appropriate penance, feels like way to atone for whatever wrong they committed, real or imagined. But punishment through silence doesn't serve anyone, doesn't repair damage, doesn't create healing or growth or resolution, just creates distance and missed opportunity for repair. What you're supposed to do with this information: decide if you want contact or if you've just been checking out of habit. Because checking obsessively doesn't always mean you actually want them back. Sometimes just means you want closure, want to know, want to stop wondering. Be honest with yourself. Do you want them, or do you just want to stop feeling rejected by their silence? Do you want relationship, or do you just want confirmation you mattered? Different answers require different actions. If you don't actually want them, if you just want closure or confirmation, stop checking, actively stop, delete message thread maybe, remove them from easy access, create friction between impulse to check and ability to check, and work on creating your own closure, your own confirmation that you matter, your own peace with ambiguity, because waiting for them to provide closure keeps you stuck. If you do want them, if you want actual connection, not just resolution of wondering, consider reaching out yourself. I know. You want them to reach out. You want them to make move. You want them to be brave first. But wanting them to be brave doesn't make them brave. And waiting for them to overcome fear might mean waiting forever. So if you want them and their silence is just fear not rejection, reach out, not desperately, not with demand, just clearly. Hey, been thinking about you. How are you? Simple, honest, creating opening without forcing, giving them permission to respond without requiring them to overcome terror alone. Worst case, they don't respond or respond coldly and you get actual answer instead of continuing to wonder. Clarity, even painful clarity, serves better than ambiguity. Best case, they respond relieved. I've been wanting to reach out but didn't know if you wanted to hear from me. And conversation opens. Either way, you know. Either way, you're not stuck in limbo. If you want them but you're not willing to reach out, if you need them to make first move, then stop checking, stop torturing yourself with their silence. Decide, I want them to reach out. If they don't, that's my answer. But while I'm waiting, I'm not going to check obsessively. Set boundary with yourself. Check once daily, maybe, or once every few days, not every 10 minutes. Create life that's full enough that their silence doesn't occupy every moment. That's not pretending you don't care. That's protecting yourself while you wait. And examine the story you're telling yourself about their silence. They don't care is one story, but is it accurate? Maybe they're terrified. Maybe they're dealing with crisis. Maybe they're respecting what they think is your boundary. Maybe they're convinced you've moved on. All of those are different than they don't care. All of those create different possibilities. Don't let worst case story become only story. Hold it lightly. Stay open to other interpretations even while protecting against disappointment. What's likely to happen, the probable trajectories. They reach out eventually, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe next month. But eventually courage exceeds fear, or crisis resolves, or perfect moment stops mattering, or they realize you haven't moved on. And when they reach out, you get to decide based on timing, based on what they say, based on whether you're still available emotionally or whether you've genuinely moved forward. You're not obligated to respond positively just because they finally reached out. You're allowed to have moved on, allowed to decide too much time passed, allowed to require more than apology for silence. Or you're allowed to be relieved, to engage, to explore whether connection still exists or whether distance killed it. Either response is valid. No right answer, just your answer based on what you feel when moment arrives. They don't reach out, and silence becomes permanent. And eventually, after enough time, you stop checking, stop wondering, genuinely move on. That outcome hurts, is loss, is grief, is accepting you'll never know why they stayed silent. But it's also freedom, freedom from limbo, freedom to invest energy in people who actually show up, freedom to build life that doesn't include them. And years later, maybe they reach out with, I should have called, and you're already so past it that their regret is interesting but not devastating. You reach out and get clarity, either positive clarity that creates opening or negative clarity that creates ending. But either way, you're not stuck anymore. And taking action, reaching out yourself instead of waiting, shifts dynamic, shifts you from passive victim of their silence to active participant in outcome. That shift, that agency serves you regardless of their response because you're not just waiting anymore. You're deciding, and deciding is power even when decision creates painful answer. The power is yours. It always has been. They haven't called or texted you yet. Here's why. They're terrified, not indifferent. They're overthinking, not forgetting. They're waiting for perfect that never comes. They're dealing with crisis you don't know about. They're respecting boundary they think you set. They're convinced you've moved on. Or they're punishing themselves. And your job is deciding if you actually want contact or just want to stop wondering, reaching out yourself if you want connection. And their silence is just fear or stopping obsessive checking while you wait and creating life full enough that their silence doesn't consume you. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. Trust yourself. And listen, their silence says more about them than about you. It says about their fear, their wounds, their capacity, their circumstances. Doesn't say you're forgettable, doesn't say you don't matter, doesn't say you're not worthy of contact. You are worthy. You do matter. And if they can't overcome fear or circumstances or whatever long enough to reach out, that's information about them, not verdict about you. So stop checking obsessively, hoping this time it'll be them. Either reach out yourself, or decide you're done waiting, or set boundary with checking and create full life while you wait. But don't stay in this limbo, this torture, this constant checking that's slowly destroying your peace. You deserve answer, either from them or from yourself. Get one,